Hey everyone. It's certainly been a while since I've posted on this channel, and there's a good reason for that. I went off to college about 2 years ago, and unfortunately I seldom found the time to make videos and keep this channel active. But now that the college has been closed down for the semester due to concerns of a certain virus I'm sure everyone is aware of and sick of hearing about as of late, I found myself now with an excess of free time. And believe me, I'm actually incredibly grateful and lucky that I'm privileged enough to have this free time. Thus, I've decided to try and put it to good use for all you horror fans out there by pumping out some more narrations. And good news is I'm actually getting a new microphone soon, so hopefully you guys will hear a dramatic difference in sound quality. In the meantime, though, I'll be using my standard microphone, and thus I apologize for the sound quality. But without further ado, let's dive into those stories. This occurred in 2009 when I was 22 years old, and I was leaving my home state of California to head east for my corrections job. I was driving down the loneliest highway portion of the route, and it was around 3 a.m. on a Sunday. They didn't call it the loneliest highway for nothing, as I hadn't seen another soul for at least a half hour. I was getting sleepy, but I wasn't tired enough to pull over and take a nap. At some point, I saw a broken down car on the side of the highway. I slowed down and saw a woman standing next to the car. I approached this woman with caution, rolling down my window just a sliver. Something about this woman wasn't right. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I now know it was a subconscious red flag. I asked her if she needed me to call a tow truck or maybe AAA for her, and she immediately tried to open my door. I explained to her that I didn't feel comfortable letting her in, but I'd instead wait in my car until a tow truck came. She immediately got this look of rage on her face and started berating me. She said, "Oh, you're a big man. What am I going to do to you?" And then continued to say that I was cruel for not letting her in. This is the part in the story where I admit I fucked up. I can see this now 10 years later. I begrudgingly unlocked my door, figuring that she's right. She's at most 5'2", and I'm over 6 feet and I have 100 pounds on her. She looked to be about 90 or so pounds. She slips in and I ask her who I can call. This was 10 years ago, so I had a little BlackBerry Slide at the time. She starts telling me that she'd just prefer if I give her a ride to the next town. Now I'm starting to realize that I done fucked up, because she's now avoiding eye contact and she's fumbling in her purse, and when I mention calling for help, she's now getting aggressive, demanding that I take her to the next town. I'm so busy trying to unfuck this situation that I miss a man who was either hiding in or near her car. It wasn't until he was almost to my driver's side door that I managed to catch him in my rearview mirror. My flight or fight response immediately kicked in. I put my car in drive and sped right off as this dude was reaching for my car door. I sped off and heard a ping noise and my rearview mirror exploded. He was shooting at me. The adrenaline alone had me doing nearly 90, and by the time this woman realized in whatever drug-induced stupor she was in that her little plan was futile, she started hitting me, telling me to stop and to let her out. When I reached what I thought was a safe distance away from the shooter, I did just that. I pulled over and demanded she got out of my car. She started going for her oversized purse, but I had enough of this. I was literally shaking with adrenaline. So I reached over, opened the door, and pretty much shoved her out of the car. I tried grabbing for her purse, but she managed to hold on to it, but not before dumping half of what was in there on my passenger seat. I sped off with my door still open and waited till I got a good distance from her and slammed it shut and locked it. I clenched the wheel and drove as if I was on autopilot. It wasn't until later that morning when I pulled into a Denny's that I realized how close I was to getting killed. I had a good cry about that, and then I realized a bunch of her things had spilled onto my passenger seat. Most of it was nasty wadded up napkins, a few tubes of lipstick, and, of course, drug paraphernalia. I considered calling the cops or finding a highway patrol officer, but instead I did something stupid. I tossed all of her things that had fallen into a trash bag and threw them away. At the time, I had the dream of becoming a cop, and I knew that if I got caught with drug paraphernalia, that would be impossible. I don't think they'd believe me if I said the drug paraphernalia wasn't mine. I noticed a cop at the gas station across from the Denny's and told him what happened. He pretty much berated me for pulling over and then for letting her in. He said he'd look into it, but I honestly doubt he did. I was so shaken up, I pretty much picked at my pancakes at Denny's and then left to continue on my way. I never did replace that mirror. I actually ended up selling the car, as where I lived didn't require me to have one. But to this day, 10 years later, I still hesitate to stop and help stranded motorists. This happened in 2015 when I was 16 and still living in my hometown, a forgotten little beach town in the middle of nowhere that's so remote it's probably not even known by surrounding areas. Basically, there's 3 things you can do here as a teenager. You can go to the movies, swim, or you can go to this pathetic little place called Miller's Fun Park. It's relatively similar to a lot of fun park type things, only it's a whole lot worse. There's a crappy arcade with broken skee-ball machines, batting cages that probably haven't been used since the early 80s, a pathetic mini-golf course, and the most dangerous go-karts you've probably ever seen in your life. Miller Fun Park is on the edge of a field. On the opposite side of the field, about 3 miles down, is the beach. And across the single street are the woods. If our town is in the middle of nowhere, then Miller is practically on the moon. Anyways, getting into the story, my cousin Emma and I decided one summer night that we wanted to go go-karting. It was around 10 p.m., so we knew it'd be almost deserted, but honestly that was the way we liked it. I picked her up from her house and we made the long drive down. Once we had arrived and parked in the nearly empty parking lot, we hopped out of our car and paid for some go-karting tickets. The same people had worked there forever, I swear to God. There was no one there except for a few boys in the arcade, and a guy who looked to be in his 60s sitting on a bench near the batting cages. Emma and I paid him no mind and went to the go-kart track. Like I said, these karts were incredibly dangerous, so I was focused on nothing but making sure I wasn't going to skid and flip as we raced way too fast down that windy track. This is why I didn't notice the guy walk over to the fence, and why I didn't notice him watching us until we pulled into the lanes after our last lap. He was standing on the other side of the fence, right where I parked. He stared at me with the most unsettling expression, a creepy smile playing on his cracked lips as his dark eyes gleamed. I managed an uneasy smile back, handed another ticket to the guy running the go-karts, who was obviously higher than a kite, and Emma and I went off again. This time I couldn't focus. That dude gave me the worst type of feeling. My eyes were constantly finding their way to the metal fence where he stood, unmoving and watching us every time we were in his view. And the thing that was bothering me most was that we had only bought 3 tickets. We were on our second to last run, and he was standing directly next to the exit gate. I was just praying to myself that he'd move when we were done. But, of course, no such luck. Our last go came and went, and I had no choice but to pull in next to him, unbuckle my seatbelt, and get out of my go-kart. I glanced over to Emma a few feet away as I opened the exit gate to see if she was as scared as I was, but she didn't seem to notice as she bounced over and bragged about how she had beat me the last 2 times. I was barely listening. I opened the gate, and the guy stepped in front of me just as I was leaving. "Hey there," he said. His voice was dry, and he smelled of cigarettes. "What are you cute girls doing all alone here?" My eyes darted over to Emma, who was looking at the dude with both confusion and annoyance. What?" she said, pushing past the gate as she stood beside me. "It's so late." His tone was as hungry as his eyes, and he reminded me of a snake. "Do your parents know you're out?" "Yes," I answered quickly. "They're actually waiting for us. We need to get going." That was a lie, and probably sounded like it from my tone, but I tried to push past him anyways. It didn't work. He grabbed my shoulder to keep me in front of him. "Nonsense. I saw you girls pull up alone." My heart dropped into my stomach. He had? "Are you heading out? Why don't I walk you to your car?" He starts inching towards me, and I looked to Emma for help. With one swift movement, she pulled me halfway behind her and started sizing this guy up. This was pretty dumb, since we were both small, and though she's a few inches taller than me, neither of us were anywhere near his size. This guy was 6'2" easily, but she didn't seem to care. "Actually, we were just headed to the arcade," she says harshly. "Her boyfriend is going to meet us there." I did have a boyfriend at the time, but he wasn't coming. He wasn't even in town. And I knew Emma knew this. This guy's face immediately changes. His smile disappeared, and he was now glaring down at me with a look of annoyance in his eyes. I felt myself start to cower. "Boyfriend," he says roughly. Emma didn't give me enough time to say anything back. She grabbed my arm and tugged me behind her into the arcade. The boys from before had already left, and the usual girl who had worked there was nowhere to be found. Still, it felt safer than being outside. We ran to the back and hid behind the claw machine. "What the hell do we do? I left my phone in the car," a whisper shouted. There was no way I was going out there alone, and the pothead go-kart guy had already disappeared into the small ticket shack. "I don't have mine either. I left it charging," she said, face-palming. "We're just gonna have to make a run for it." "Are you crazy? He's probably waiting for us in the parking lot." "What about the guy who runs the go-karts? We could get him to walk us out," she said. I just shook my head. "He's high as Mount Everest right now. I don't want to risk running all the way to the ticket stand for nothing." "Then we have no choice." Emma stood up, pulling me with her. "Let's go." I swallowed hard, wanting to cry. I'd never been that scared before. There was something so wrong about that guy. We made our way out of the arcade, looking around to see if he's nearby. The park was now absolutely deserted. Emma practically dragged me to the exit. I was looking every direction every second, waiting for the guy to come out of the woods or something and pounce on us. But he didn't. Everything was still. "Get your keys out," Emma instructed, and I pulled them from my pocket. We were about 20 feet from the car when I stopped dead in my tracks. "What?" she whispered to me. "I never locked the car, Emma." "What?" "I didn't lock it. What if—" I trailed off, but she knew what I was saying. She started inching towards the car, and I grabbed her arm to stop her, but she pulled away. "I'm just gonna peek. If I say run, you run." Her voice is quiet. I nodded shakily. She eventually made it close enough to see inside, but by the way she was squinting, I knew it was too dark to really make anything out. My heart was beating out of my chest. What if he's in there? What if he jumps out? Or what if we get in and he asphyxiates me like in the movies? All these thoughts almost drown out in the unmistakable sound of shoes slamming against the pavement. My head whipped around instantly, and he was there, sprinting at us at full speed out of the woods. I screamed bloody murder and broke for the car, jiggling the handle as I realized that I had indeed locked it. Emma was already on the other side, screaming at me to unlock it. I fumbled with the keys, but managed not to drop them as I unlocked the door, flung it open, and practically threw myself inside. I had just managed to close the door when he was there, slamming his fists against the window and shouting incoherently. I was sobbing at this point and barely managed to lock the doors as he goes for the handle and yanks on it as hard as he can. Emma was screaming at me to go, and through tears in my eyes, I shoved the key into the ignition and flew into reverse. He was still chasing us and yelling as I veered backwards out of the lot and turned as fast as I could while slamming on the gas. I was driving like I was still in go-kart, but I didn't care. I could barely see the road through the flood of tears, and Emma had to grab the wheel several times to keep us from crashing before I regained some composure. Though obviously shaken up, she had managed to keep her tears in and be the sane one out of the two of us as we drove at least 30 miles over the speed limit the whole way back to my house. We didn't tell either of our parents about this, and looking back, I wish we had, because there was definitely something seriously wrong with that guy. But we were too scared of what they might say or do. I thought that they would blame us somehow. So it stayed a secret between us, something we didn't even talk about until months after that horrifying encounter. And safe to say, we never went back to Miller's Fun Park after that. I urge you all to be extremely careful when going out at night. And to the lunatic who tried to do God knows what to my cousin and I, let's never meet again.